That was one of those episodes where I walk away and I cannot think of anything critical I have to say about anything that occurred in that episode. And I think the biggest reason why I feel that way is because they landed the ending without anything controversial. And I think that's very important. If you go back to last week, that episode had some really good moments that ultimately get overshadowed by an ending that a lot of people felt disagreed with their own common sense and their understanding of the story as it has been presented up to this point. So episode 4 avoids that mistake. So having any other issues that may have occurred during this episode, we don't think about when we get done and when the credits are rolling and maybe we jump into inside the episode with the interview with Brian Condell and the rest of the cast and crew. That's the benefit of landing the ending correctly. Now, there are other things, though, that I do want to go back to, and maybe upon rewatches, I'll find some more things to be critical about, but I was very pleased with episode 4. I think it's going to be very popular, especially among fans that are unfamiliar with the source material. I think this hit a lot of boxes. It gave us some of that old school, seasons 1 through 4, Game of Thrones, those more intimate conversations. You had a moment there with Rhaenys and Corlys. You have that moment with Alicent and Larys. You have the moment with Alicent and Aegon. And then you get both of the council meetings. So it gets a lot of that political drama. It lands that. And then to end the second, or really the last third of the episode, focusing on the Battle of Rook's Rest. Now, for book fans, this is something that we've definitely been looking forward to here for a long time. And I don't think it disappointed at all. I'm curious, please let me know in the comment section what you guys thought. I was very happy with this. You look at the book, and I know there's a lot of book loyalists that they really want this show to stick to the books almost verbatim. Now, there's a couple things that are just tilted just slightly differently here in the presentation of the Battle of Rook's Rest. And if I linger on that too much, I do apologize. But let's go ahead and start there, because that's what I just got done viewing. That's what I'm sure a lot of you just got done viewing, and that's what's still in your mind fresh. And then we're going to go back to some other things, because I also think Daemon at Harrenhal is fantastic. Again, I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed it last week as well. And there's some other moments here that I also did really like that I definitely want to talk about. So, Battle of Rook's Rest, I said it was presented a little bit differently here than it was in the book version, and it's only slightly. A big part of it is that the way it reads in Fire and Blood is that, yeah, they are trying to draw out a dragon. This is a setup, but Aegon and Aemon are both in on it. So to make it a little bit different, Aegon going there kind of rogue without any warning and not being a part of the plan at all, I think it really does. It fit well, especially with the prior scenes, with him being kind of belittled at the small council, or feeling belittled, or feeling invalidated, feeling worthless. And then that emotional conversation there that he gets right there with his mother afterwards, with Alicent. She kind of puts him in his place. She tells him the truth, and the truth is sometimes the hardest thing to hear, especially when you're in a very emotional state. And all he's really looking for, what he's really seeking, is validation. And Alicent says a very interesting thing, basically suggesting that just because you have a crown does not, for no reason, does that mean that you have earned any type of wisdom. You don't suddenly have these great battle strategies and understand how to become a great ruler simply because you wear the crown now. So he's super charged up emotionally, and then being confronted by Aemon at the small council, I love that. I really love the Valyrian conversation, and it's clear that Aegon cannot keep up with Aemon, and that's really been consistent since season 1, is that Aemon is the one that takes everything seriously. He takes his role as a prince very seriously. He became well trained with his sword, right? Trained very rigorously with Criston Cole. He does study. He did read. He did take his teaching of Valyrian speech very seriously. And I do like the idea of that. We saw it with Daemon and Rhaenyra there in season 1. I like that being their own little coded conversation that nobody else can really get in on. I mean, maybe the maybe Orwell understands a little bit, being a maester, but I don't know. I found that really good, and being that the driving force that pushes Aegon into that war, I think that is a better, I think that's a better narrative. I think that's a better story than what we get in Fire and Blood, as far as getting us a little bit more emotionally connected to these characters. And I'm going to say that I'm pretty sure that it's going to come out. It's going to be realized in later episodes that absolutely Aemon intended to attack Aegon. I think that's a certainty. I don't think, they kind of presented it there inside the episode that, maybe not, maybe it was intentional, maybe it was collateral damage. I don't think so. Because you watched, Aemon didn't come out when he was supposed to. So Kristen Cole is expecting Aemon and Vhagar to fly over, and they set the trap perfectly. They provoked a dragon from Rhaenyra's side, from the Blacks, so they've got one, and they've got one of the tougher dragons possible. Speaking about melees, I actually have a video dedicated strictly to melees on this channel. If you want to go check that out, I would definitely appreciate it. But I think Aemon did that intentionally. Speaking of videos I've already made, I actually did make a video about that too, where I think Aemon would attack Aegon during Rook's Rest specifically. If you go back and watch, I'll put a link to it at the end. But because I am crazy and I think there's some sort of, conspiracy or fan theory in my head that maybe Aemon and Helena are actually, more than what they appear, that there's something romantic there. I don't think that's actually being portrayed as true here in House of the Dragon, so I think I'm wrong about that, but I think I ended up being right in that video about Aemon eventually using Rook's Rest as an opportunity to attack Aegon. And the way that it happened, Aegon's there and he ruins the plan, seeking his own glory. When Aemon has earned the right, he's earned this. He did, create a strategy there with Kristen Cole, and it's all going according to plan, and then Aegon shows up to kind of mess things up. And he is not suited for battle. We've never actually seen dragons go against each other at war. I mean, I know Game of Thrones Season 8 showed us with the Ice Dragon versus Daenerys' dragons, with Viserion versus Daenerys and Drogon and then Jon and Rhaegal, but I think this just worked really well. And I think fans that only watch the show, they're going to be very, on their toes waiting for next week to see, well, is Aegon dead? And that's going to be really exciting, especially people unfamiliar with the book. I'm excited to see their reaction to this particular episode and the fallout from this episode. I'm excited to get back to Corlys. I think that's going to be really fascinating. And also, I do want to make one note. I keep saying I want to see something more redeeming about Kristen Cole. And now we've seen how he internalizes grief and guilt. He basically projects it on other people. He becomes pretty hypocritical all the time. And I'm hoping this time, maybe they do something a little bit different. I like that we got to see a lot of things from his perspective. I thought that was really good. Now, Rhaenys and Meleys dying, I think they did a good job this episode, last episode, really this second season. They have kind of almost forced her into the screen and gave her relevant reasons to be on screen. And I believe that was enough to connect fans, especially show-only fans, to this character. And frankly, for me too, as a book fan, because I feel, again, I always feel like these characters were not really developed tremendously well in Fire and Blood, and I don't think they're actually intended to be developed, more so than, some general outlines, some characteristics, just enough to get them a part of the general plot for Fire and Blood, and to get them a little bit more fleshed out here. I think they did enough there for Rhaenys. I think her death is going to hit land. I was going to say hit well, but land. And for show only fans, I hope that had the impact that they were going for. I think it will. I think it did. I really did. I liked the moment there with Aegon and Aemond and the Green Council. I think that was great to develop that friction. But that's enough about how that episode ended. Let's jump back, though, kind of toward the beginning there with Daemon and Harrenhal. I love Daemon just he's kind of losing a grip on reality. And he's getting these flashbacks. When you saw Lena show up in his, is he starting to have hallucinations in real time? I think that's something that is just really fascinating. Last week I thought it was just because he was standing next to the weirwood tree, but really it's just Harrenhal, the haunting of Harrenhal. And I kind of think that they have set this up well, where it's similar to, if you're familiar with Shirley Jackson and The Haunting of Hill House. They've got a great series. It actually stars Michael Huisman on Netflix. Michael Huisman, he actually played Dario Naharis in Game of Thrones after season 4 onward. So check that out. But if you're familiar with the Shirley Jackson story, you'll see what I mean there with Harrenhal. It's like this castle is alive and it's dedicated to really messing with Daemon's psyche, and it's playing into his emotions. There's this idea of Daemon that everybody has, that he's able to claim plausible deniability because he never outwardly claims any of these things to be true. Anytime there's an accusation made about him, even Viserys would defend him. But we're seeing that deep down, that actually is who Daemon is. The worst version of Daemon that people imagine, there's a part of it that is true, and that's coming out in front of Daemon. Maybe even Daemon doesn't know some of these things are true. And the jealousy of Rhaenyra, seeing that, I think that's what a lot of people accused him of. And us as fans, reading the book or watching the show, maybe we didn't see it that way. Maybe we're like, no, you guys are painting Daemon in a bad light. But what they're showing us here in House of the Dragon is that Daemon has some demons that he is buried deep down, and he likes to disassociate himself with these ideas or this envy or jealousy, this desire to become, king, or to sit the Iron Throne, to take the place of Viserys and then take the place of Rhaenyra. And I like the vision there where he sees what is kind of a blend of himself and Aemond, and I think that's going to have greater implications as we move forward in this story. If you're familiar with the book, I don't want to spoil anything here for show only fans, but I do think it's really important that we're starting to see what Daemon has been reluctant to do, or he's been accused of wanting to basically steal his brother's throne. He's been accused of wanting to steal Rhaenyra's throne. He's never really done that, but we're seeing a desire inside of him that he wants to. Now, I think it's important that we are seeing this mirrored version of Daemon and Aemond. But here we see Aemond does take it a step further. Aemond is willing to maybe cross those lines where Daemon has always been accused of wanting to do that, but he's never done it. And here we're seeing he actually does have that desire, and yet he's resisted. And yet he still has that guilt. He's starting to develop this guilt, and it seems now where he's trying to be his typical kind of cocky, arrogant self in a lot of ways when he's talking to these lords there at Harrenhal, is starting to come off as inauthentic, where this is who he thinks he is, but it's not. And he's really starting to confront himself. And it's really fascinating. I think that's the most George R.R. Martin type of character. And this is who George said is his favorite Targaryen. So to see him really embody that human heart in conflict with itself, I think they're doing a really good job of that. And I think Harrenhal really brings out the best of that dynamic for a character, especially a George R.R. Martin character. I think Ryan Condal did a great job on this episode. It actually was written by Condal, so I thought that was great. I want to jump back though to a moment there with Rhaenys and Corlys. The idea that Rhaenys basically accused Corlys of this guy who saved him isn't just, oh, that's just Alan of Hall. Rhaenys basically says she knows who this is, insinuating that is that this is Corlys's bastard. Now, if you haven't seen this in the we haven't seen this in the show, but getting that accusation for book fans, I think it's interesting because it does confirm a suspicion that a lot of us have. And really, the book shares this suspicion as well, where it's claimed that those are actually Laenor's children, Adam and Alan of Hall. But actually, they're probably Corlys's children. And I think that was handled well. And I just, again, like I liked seeing Corlys and Rhaenys together. I like feeling like that is a real relationship. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of drama there. And even when there is, like a moment like that, and even in prior episodes, if it's something big or dramatic, it seems to get shot down pretty quickly, or does it resolved relatively quickly. Where this moment, though, was a little different, where Corlys actually gets a little frustrated and a little passive about the way he responds to Rhaenys here. And then ultimately, she ends up dying in this episode. I'm interested to see Corlys after this. What do they do with this character now that he's been hit with that type of grief? He's already lost 2 of his children, Laena for sure, and he assumes Laenor is dead as well. So now losing Rhaenys, who is this man now? Does he turn to Adam and Alan of Hall? What's going to happen there? I'm really excited to watch that get developed. And there's some other things too. Like I keep thinking about this conversation with Rhaenyra and Jace. So I struggle to find anything to be critical about. The one thing I'm so hoping they do something in House of the Dragon very interesting to this Aegon the Conqueror's A Song of Ice and Fire prophecy. Because if they don't, they have insisted on it too much. They've brought too much attention to it that in our minds, right, we assume like, well, yeah, this isn't going to be resolved because the real conclusion of that occurs in what we saw in Game of Thrones, and perhaps we'll see in A Song of Ice and Fire and Winds of Winter and A Dream of Spring, if that ever happens. I know pipe dreams, but if that ever happens, that's where we would expect to see it, is at the end of that main series, at the end of the main story that we saw in Game of Thrones. And really the real main story that we're all waiting to see an ending to from A Song of Ice and Fire, the actual book series. So I hope they do something with that. I don't know. If there's one thing I'm going to be critical about this whole series for, is if they keep pushing this into the audience's attention and they don't do something really interesting with it by the end. I'm hoping and thinking that they will, because it seems crazy to me that they would just keep putting this in the front of our eyes and ultimately, it goes nowhere. But, we will see. So there's a lot there. This, I think, was right up there with episode 2. Is it better? I think it really goes into preference. I like the slow pace and the drama of episode 2. And again, this is 4 episodes in a row where we are on the same timeline. Like everything is making chronological sense to the audience, and where there's no time jumps. I mean, it's just been such a refreshing thing. Even last week, I know a lot of people had problems with that episode. I did too. But just having that good rhythm, that good pace, you can get past some of these moments that don't work that great. And in the future, when we binge watch these episodes, we're not going to notice, oh, well, I didn't really like this one scene in episode 3 from season 2. You're not going to think about it that way. You're going to breeze right past it when you start binge watching this stuff. There's a lot of episodes of other shows where they just had total episode failures, where the whole episode was just awful and everybody hated it. And yet some of those shows are still considered great. You think about like The Sopranos or Mad Men and stuff like that. They did have full bad episodes. The episodes a lot of people were like, that's the worst episode of the series. And they crushed right through it. Like it's just not a big deal. So a scene here or there. I think a lot of Game of Thrones fans started binge watching Game of Thrones probably right around like season 5, season 6, maybe even later. So there were moments in the first 4 seasons, even before Game of Thrones, went on a decline as far as what a lot of people perceive as quality of storytelling and, just common sense. In seasons 1 through 4, Game of Thrones, there are moments that just don't really work that well. There are scenes that, just don't hit the mark. And, if you were watching it 1 week at a time and you had a whole week waiting for it, maybe those things would have stuck out to you more then. However, it was being graded by itself, it only had itself to be compared to. So House of the Dragon doesn't have that luxury. It's being compared to Game of Thrones. And in particular, it's being compared to the very best of Game of Thrones. Nobody's really trying to stack this up against season 8 necessarily. Everybody wants this to be better than that, so they're not comparing it to season 8 of Game of Thrones. They're comparing it to the very best seasons. So I think seasons 1 through 4. So when something goes wrong, it's more jarring. I think it stands out to us a little bit more. Plus, we're having a whole week. Like people that are watching this show now, they're actually watching it, waiting. They watch it on Sunday. They wait a whole week. So they've got a whole week to think about these moments that occurred. So I'd like to give episode 3 some slack. I wrote up a review on it that's not very favorable because of those scenes, but that also did some good things. But I thought this was a total return to form here in episode 4. I think it got right back on track where episode 2 left off as far as overall quality. I thought it was really good. I'm really curious to see what everybody else thinks and where you would kind of rank this. We've got 4 episodes out now. We've got 4 to go. We're halfway through it. Where do you guys rank this? Let me know down in the comment sections. 1 through 4, is this the very best? 1 being the highest, 4 being the lowest. I've got 4 right there with episode 2. So if I had to choose right now, I'd say it is episode 2's the best, episode 4, episode 1, and then episode 3. Let me know what you guys think. And, I hope you guys had a good time with it. I'm going to jump off here for now, and I'll have a more formal review for you here in a few days. If you want to check out some other stuff I've released on this season, you can click right here.